Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. In a video I made just a little while ago, I discussed a little bit of muscle biopsies as far as there being a structural difference that could be seen in a microscope on people who had used anabolics versus people who had not. And it caused several people already, if you guys scroll through the comments, they're there, saying, hey, couldn't this be used as a form of drug testing? Could WADA be implementing this? Let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right. First of all, let's talk about WADA's testing, because the answer to the question, yes, this would be dramatically more effective than any other drug test for steroids ever invented. Hands down. Hands down. 100 times more effective. I said 10 in one of the comments. It'd probably be 100 times more effective because it'll have a 100% success rate. Current testing's got about a 1% or less success rate. And that's the reality of it. People who are in denial of that have not been keeping up with politics for the last 15 years. And they clearly don't follow coaches who help people with this stuff. Because the reality is drug testing in sports simply doesn't work. People go, well, yeah, but they catch a few people. Yeah, but they catch a few people when everybody's on. I want you to think about that for a moment. You've had plenty of athletes up there say in recent years, everybody's on something. Everybody's on something. Now, when you have other athletes who are saying that, and they're catching less than 1%, how effective is the fucking testing? It's not. Not effective at all. How about when we had, what's his name? Victor Conte came on Joe Rogan. What was Victor Conte arrested for? Running a designer steroid laboratory that had over 10,000 professional athletes on his client list. He had over 10,000 athletes. By turning his list over, they reduced his sentence. All right, he only did like a year or two in a white-collar federal prison or something like that. It was easy time. He actually said it was pretty enjoyable, kind of like a country club. It wasn't bad, white-collar crime. Pretty much for rich people, because he was rich. When you have 10,000 professional athletes as your clients and customers, and you only have a few medical doctors on your staff, you're making a lot of money. Because, yeah, sure, he's paying all his doctors 6 figures, but he's making millions a year. Millions! And you know what he said? He said this really isn't that hard. All we had to do was keep 2 or 3 drugs in development at any given time ahead of the one that we had cranked out. And as soon as someone figured out how to start detecting metabolites in the one that we made, we switch over to the next one, which no one's ever seen. It could take them 3 to 6 months to even start detecting that drug. All right? That's what he said. And you know what else he said? Yeah, I got caught. I got busted. Just bad luck. He goes, you know what? I just got unlucky. He goes, there's a dozen other labs doing the exact same thing I do. They're out there. So if there's a dozen labs doing that, and he had 10,000 athletes on his list, you guys do the math. You guys do the math. Almost everybody's on in professional sports, especially at the elite level, especially when there's any money involved, and how could they not be? How could they not be? When you're talking about genetically elite people competing for multi-million-dollar contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts, do you understand how much incentive there is to do anything possible to gain a 1% improvement in performance? When a 1% improvement in your performance is worth an extra $5 million a year, don't you think they're going to find experts who can help them through drug testing? When you're talking about that type of money, don't you think they're going to find experts to help them? Anyone ever met a champion? Anybody ever met a champion? I've met a few. What's their mentality? Do champions say things like, well, it's not about whether you win or lose, it's about how you play the game? Champions don't think that way. Champions say, I will fucking win at any cost. I will be the best. I am going to fucking win. I don't care what it takes. I don't care how hard I have to work. I don't care who I got to kill. I'm going to be the best. A lot of champions say, I don't care if it kills me. All right, being a champion is not a healthy mentality, by the way. Just throwing that out there. Not the healthiest of mentalities. But that's how they think. And when they got millions of dollars on the line, you don't think they can hire experts? And you don't think once those experts help one athlete, they realize there's good money in this? They help a dozen more, and a dozen more. All right, this is big business. Drug testing can be beaten easily. In fact, I've done videos explaining how to get through some of the minor testing, a lot of the college testing. I've given protocols on here of how to beat college level testing unless they get you at 2 a.m. Only way they can pop you is at 2 a.m. Now, they say, well, they sometimes do that. They hit athletes at 2 in the morning. Yeah, they do. How many of them do they hit at 2 in the morning? How many of them do they hit at 4 in the morning? Think about that. And do you think they stay on stuff all the time? You think they stay on year round? Especially given that we talked about the structural changes. In fact, Victor Conte made a point of that. You're looking at long-term structural changes. Even my guys didn't stay on all the time. The athletes that we helped, they weren't on all the time. They spent as much time clean as they did on stuff. So if you're only hitting 1% of the athletes at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and they know that that's the least likely time you're going to hit them, and they're off half the year, how many are you really going to catch? 0.5%? That's 1 in 200. The fuck are you going to catch anybody? Now, that being said, we know that's the case. We know that they don't catch people. It's like I talked about before, the 2012 Olympic Games. How much did the Olympics spend on drug testing preparing for that? $4 billion spent in drug testing. $4 billion. There's big money in drug testing, too. That's a big business. $4 billion business every Olympics. $4 billion. And remember what I said, that when they were testing for an old drug, a 50-year-old anabolic steroid that had a 72-hour clearance time for metabolite test, doesn't show in blood. It shows in blood in the same day you take it, not the next day. And urine has a 72-hour detection time. It took them 50 years to improve the drug test for that. It's called turinabol. That's a street name, or T-bol. They made a new test, and they came back in 2013, and they tested urine samples on the 2012 games. And only poor countries use T-bol, by the way. Sophisticated countries don't mess with T-bol. That's an old school drug. It can be detected for 72 hours. What good is that? Only poor third world countries use that shit. But out of the clean urine test from 2012, how many did they find dirty? Over 200. They found over 200 positives for turinabol using the new test. They can detect it for a week instead of 3 days. 200. That meant all those athletes knew the testing windows on a 3-day clearance drug, passed the drug test, but then over 200 of them were caught with a test that can detect it a week later instead of just 3 days. Sounds to me like those athletes, even in those poor countries, still knew how to get around the current testing. So anyone who thinks drug testing works, you're extremely naive or you're very ignorant. So, biopsies. I linked you guys a study. Now, I've discussed in the past a study where they found they took powerlifters who had said in a self-reported data that they had been clean for 3 years, but had previously used anabolic steroids at a pretty hefty dose for at least a year, for at least an entire year of use. And they had all been clean at least 3 years. And you know what they found? They could tell every single one of them. When they pulled muscle biopsies of their trapezius muscles, what did they find? They could tell them apart from guys who had never used steroids. Even 3 years after coming off, they could look in a microscope and every single one of them looked different than the guys who only lifted weights with no drugs. After 3 years of being clean, they could still see it in the muscle tissue. They were structurally different. They had more nuclei in the muscle cells. It caused a change in the muscle cells that it continued to stay there visible through a microscope for over 3 years after they had come clean. When we did this other study, which I linked in that other video for you guys earlier today, what did they find? They found that when they tested lifetime clean athletes versus guys who had previously used drugs and were now clean, they could absolutely tell them apart in the microscope on the muscle biopsies of their thighs. They could tell. They could look at each group, and every single one of them, they could tell under the microscope which group they were in, if they had used anabolic steroids or not. They could look in the microscope and tell with 100% certainty. Every single guy that they look at the muscle biopsy in the group, what did they find? Every one of them had more muscle cell nuclei and more capillaries going to each individual muscle cell than the guys who had never used drugs. Every single one of them. What does that tell you? That tells you that anyone who uses anabolic steroids for a prolonged period of time, it makes permanent changes in the muscle tissue that you can see under a microscope. A year, 3 years, 4 years after they come off, it's still visible in a microscope. Why are we bothering with urine and blood tests? Why is WADA doing that? Because biopsies are invasive. But you know what this also means? This means that drug testing is a dog and pony show. It's a complete fucking farce. It is a complete farce. They spend $4 billion a year because it's big business. It looks good. It looks good for the public. They want to tell you that all your heroes are clean, that they're pure pillars of virtue. And they're all on drugs. Fucking all of them are on drugs. But that lets them claim that they're pinnacles of virtue and fair play in sports. And fair play is how you get ahead in life, right? And that's how you become the best of the best. Even in the competitive business world. How about even in war? Even in war. It's all about fair play. You got to give your opponent a fighting chance. That's how they teach our special forces guys, right? Everyone always talks about some of that. Well, real man, really? Real warriors give you a fighting chance? They play fair? Give you 50-50 odds? I don't think so. Well, sports are a replication of war. They were meant to simulate war. We treat them like war at the Olympics when it comes country to country. So we pretend like this is all about fairness. But the truth is, most of our countries, we think of our Olympic athletes, a lot of countries think that's soldiers. That's soldiers representing their country in an international war. Not fair play. But it looks good for show that we pretend it is. Now, if they were serious about catching athletes, this is new data. I heard, like I said in the other video, I heard a registered nurse say years ago. Actually, let me tell you who that registered nurse was. That was my own mother. She's dead now, but my mother said, when she was still alive, and she died 10 years ago, I don't see why they don't just biopsy them for drug testing. You could totally tell it apart in a microscope. My mother said that over a decade ago, because she had done clinical work and lab work and everything. You can totally tell someone's been on steroids. You just look at a muscle biopsy. She knew that over a decade ago, so that meant medical doctors knew it back then, because she wouldn't have known it had medical doctors not told her that. And she knew that because they had a patient who they had to do a muscle biopsy of who used to be a bodybuilder. The doctor said, yeah, you could tell he had been on steroids because showed her in the microscope. His doctor knew that. So we could tell if people had used gear a few years ago even to get ready for the games. We don't. And you know what? The athletes would scream and yell in protest if we did. You know why? Because it's invasive and it hurts. It would be the most invasive form of drug testing, but it would actually be the only form of testing that actually works. So because they don't do that, it's fair to say there's actually not any real interest in finding people on drugs. You know why? Because we don't want clean athletes. We don't want drug-free athletes. We want to see fucking superheroes. That's what the audience wants to see. When you watch an NFL game, do you want to watch a bunch of normal 180-pound guys who bench press 275, deadlift 450? Is that really what anyone wants to see? They want to see them hit each other? No, they want to see fucking monsters hit each other. When we watch the Olympic Games, we want to see someone run faster and jump higher than any human being has ever done before. That's what we want to see. We want to be entertained. We want to see feats of inhuman athletic ability. That's what we want to see. That's what everyone wants to see. But we all pretend that it's all about fair play and cleanliness and virtue, but it's not. It's about entertainment. In some cases, it's about war. And it has nothing to do with fair play. Nothing to do with fair play. You know the reason we pretend it's about fair play and we say, well, these sports, these teach our children valuable lessons in life? Because in our society, we have, how do I put this? Every society, really, we have a competitive society. Not everyone can be a winner. And so if you don't teach people how to lose, or you don't teach people how to not be the best, the majority of people are going to be unhappy in life. But if you teach most of them that it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, they're going to feel better about their lives. They're going to feel better about being in middle management for the rest of their life. They'll be okay with it. That's the whole point, guys. This is all about maintaining peace in society. That's the only reason we teach this and talk about it in sports. To teach that valuable lesson in society. But it doesn't teach people how to be winners. It doesn't teach them how to be champions. It doesn't teach them how to climb their way to the top in the corporate ladder. It's not teaching you how to be successful. It's teaching people how to just accept things as they are and accept their place in life. That's what it teaches them. Just play fair, play by the rules, everything will be okay. That's what it's all about. It's not actually about catching anyone. If they wanted to catch them, they'd be doing muscle biopsies. And then they would catch all of them, and then sports would suck. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.